Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. Israeli forces have killed 10 Palestinians and wounded 45 others in 30 attacks on the Gaza Strip. In a statement, the Palestinian government said Israel has hit Gaza with 20 airstrikes and 10 artillery shells since Tuesday. The targets included agricultural land, residential buildings, and a number of properties belonging to Palestinian factions. The Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shatayyeh has told Israel to immediately stop its aggression against Gaza, accusing Israeli politicians of using conflict to end political deadlock. He said Palestinian blood is being used as an electoral card. Meanwhile, the UN Special Coordinator Nikolai Militanov is urgently heading to Cairo in an attempt to reduce tensions in the Gaza Strip. Seven people have been killed and 7 others wounded in a car bomb explosion near the Interior Ministry in Afghan capital Kabul. Interior Ministry spokesperson Nusrat Rahimi says the blast occurred in the Kabul's Kasbah area. The spokesperson said the targeted area has not yet been cleared. Witnesses say the blast also damaged vehicles in the area. No one has claimed the responsibility yet. Chinese envoy on Afghan affairs Deng Shiyun says Pakistan has an important role in the Afghan peace process. Meeting Pakistan's Foreign Secretary Suhail Mahmood in Islamabad, Deng said cooperation between China and Pakistan is essential to ensure lasting peace in Afghanistan. The Foreign Secretary says Pakistan hopes for an early resumption of the stalled peace process. He appreciated China's role in Afghanistan's development and said that a trilateral foreign ministers' dialogue involving Afghanistan, Pakistan and China has provided a firm platform to boost cooperation in diverse fields. Head of the Indian-occupied Kashmir's Hurriyat Conference, Syed Ali Gilani, has thanked Pakistan for highlighting Kashmir crisis globally. In a letter to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, Gilani said this may be his last communication because of his worsening health. Gilani said Imran Khan's speech at the UNGA for oppressed people of occupied Kashmir is praiseworthy. He said the Indian occupation forces continue molestation, sexual harassment, and even sodomy to subjugate Kashmiris. He said Indian troops are now grabbing Kashmiris' lands following the Israeli forces. Gilani said Muslims of Ladakh have also been left at the mercy of brutal Indian forces because they rejected New Delhi's annexation. He urged PM Khan to take action and end all the diplomatic ties and arrangements with India after its illegal actions in the valley. Gagging press freedom further, India has denied internet access to international journalists reporting from occupied Kashmir. Authorities have banned the freelancers and web journalists from the Srinagar Media Center. The media center is the only place where journalists have internet amid total communications blackout in the valley. Journalists say they have to stand in queues for hours for a chance to file their stories. Journalist Akash Hassan has said he is leaving the center, calling this development another humiliation for local journalists. Yesterday, journalists held a protest against India-imposed clampdown and communication blackout for the past 100 days. In Washington, a U.S. Congress caucus is set to hold a hearing on the crisis in Indian-occupied Kashmir tomorrow. In a statement, the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission said that there are persistent reports of human rights violations in the valley. The commission expressed concern at excessive use of force by occupation forces, communications blackout, and illegal arrests of Kashmiri politicians. It said witnesses will testify about the human rights situation and will offer recommendations for action by Congress. The witnesses will include human rights activist Arjun Sethi, Shala Asai, Human Rights Watch official John Sifton, and Ohio University professor Hallie Dushinsky. The hearing will be hosted by Congressmen James McGovern and Christopher Smith. Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan has arrived in Washington for a two-day visit to meet US President Donald Trump. Erdogan says Turkey's military operation in northern Syria will be on agenda of the meeting. Ahead of the visit, Erdogan accused Washington of not fulfilling its commitment of vacating Kurdish forces from Turkey's bordering areas. Meanwhile, Trump has not expressed any intention of ending its alliance with the SDF. Last month, Trump pulled back US troops from northeast Syria, parting ways with the Kurdish forces, but later he joined forces with the SDF to guard Syrian oil installations from getting into ISIS hands. Iraq has indefinitely postponed all provincial council elections without citing any reason. This came after the US called on Baghdad to stop using violence against protesters and hold early elections. Prime Minister Adil Abdul Mahdi's media office said the decision was taken by the cabinet. Iraqi High Commissioner for Human Rights says over 300 protesters have been killed in anti-government demonstrations. Mahdi has refused to step down but has called for major electoral and constitutional reforms to address public grievances. Moving on to Lebanon, where the banks and schools remain closed as protesters try to prevent government employees from reaching work. Demonstrators are demanding the removal of the politicians they see as inefficient and corrupt.
Dozens of protesters gathered near the Palace of Justice in Beirut to demand an independent judiciary. They tried to prevent judges and lawyers from going to work. Lebanese media reported demonstrators also held sit-in protests outside and inside the offices of the state telecommunications provider. The Lebanese government stepped down on October 29th, but it remains in a caretaker capacity. No clear efforts have been made to form a new one. Many educational institutions were closed, as were banks after their employees called for a general strike.
Protesters in Chile say they have doubts about the government's announcement that it will change the constitution. Details in this report.
Plans to rewrite the Pinochet-era constitutions have failed to quell anger on the streets. Chile's peso plunged to a historic low as weeks of protests over inequality and social injustice began to take their toll. Over 20 people have been killed in violent demonstrations in Chile. In Santiago, people attacked the public transport system, destroying metro stations and burning buses. Protesters blocked two major highways connecting the capital Santiago with outlying cities and ports, causing traffic jams. Schools and businesses throughout the capital of 6 million people were also largely closed.
France's Interior Minister Christophe Castaner says Paris will take back 11 suspected ISIS militants from Turkey. This came after Ankara began repatriating foreign militants to their home countries.
Speaking in Parliament, Castaner says the militants will be handed over to judicial authorities. Turkey has nearly 1,500 foreign ISIS militants in custody. Over 500 French nationals, including 60 fighters, are detained in Kurdish-controlled northern Syria. France has been adamant that it will not take back adults that had joined the Islamic State in Syria. Now, it wants to seal an agreement with Iraq on taking and prosecuting its nationals from Syria. Interior Minister Castaner declined to give details about the individuals, but said that they were known by France.
Well, 16 people have died after a passenger vehicle skidded off the road and plunged into a gorge in occupied Kashmir's Doda district. Police say the victims include 5 women and 3 children. Officials say 12 died at the scene. 4 others died from their injuries during treatment. The authorities say the driver lost control while negotiating a blind curve and the vehicle fell into a 700-meter deep gorge. They said the vehicle was overloaded. Moving on to Australia, where more than 70 fires are still burning across New South Wales and 61 in Queensland. Conditions have eased up from the catastrophic danger ratings in NSW earlier, but Queensland has worsened.
The hot, dry continent of Australia has long experience with bushfires. But scientists say climate change is magnifying extreme weather conditions. The threat in New South Wales has been downgraded from catastrophic, but officials urge residents to remain vigilant. 21 people have been injured in New South Wales. 13 of these are firefighters. Officials say 50 houses have been destroyed or damaged in the state. At one point, fires broke out in the suburbs of Sydney. Further north, Queensland is expected to face dangerous wind changes today. 14 homes have been destroyed, 13 in the Cobra Ball fire near Yeppoon. Meanwhile, the waterbombing helicopter crashed in the northern state. The Queensland Ambulance Service is calling it a heavy landing and says the pilot has minor injuries.
In the United States, police are training teachers to fight back mass shooters with guns of their own. Proponents of this strategy say it makes schools a harder target for the would-be attackers. Others feel classrooms should remain gun-free, and increased gun control is the only way to tackle the problem. This report has the details.
School shootings have been a growing problem in the United States since the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. In 2018, there were 113 casualties and incidents of on-campus gun violence. In Shelby County, Ohio, one school is trying to fight back by arming its teachers.
I've always felt that school districts were a soft target, and I've always felt like that if you made it a harder target, then crazy people that want to go do stuff like that.
15 U.S. states have approved similar setups, but many U.S. citizens feel educators shouldn't be armed. Others say teachers with guns can keep both students and American gun freedoms safe.
If you come here and you want to hurt somebody, you need two things. You need a will, and you need to be in good graces with God, because you're going to need them both.
But it remains to be seen if the measure will be effective. Most school shooters eventually turn their guns on themselves or let the cops do the job for them, meaning they're not afraid of being shot. But it seems this is the best protection the US has to offer its children right now.
The London Transport Museum has organized tours in the city's abandoned underground stations, once used as a refuge in World War II. The exhibition reveals the top-secret bunkers used to protect people, such as then Prime Minister Winston Churchill. This report has more.
We're going to go this way, through there.
In between platforms of the Piccadilly Circus tube station lies a secret passage to London's past. It's been 90 years since these dark, dusty tunnels last saw any travellers, but since August, the London Transport Museum has reopened them for tours. These visitors get a chance to discover the insides of the world's oldest underground system.
Piccadilly Circus, being Piccadilly Circus and sort of the heart of London, was actually one of the most frequently used tube shelters during the Blitz and then later on the V-weapon attacks. So up to 7,000 people would shelter in this station per night.
On display are bunks used during the war, period posters and products. More surprising even, visitors can revisit a recreation of Winston Churchill's war cabinet, set up at the time inside Down Street Station as he awaited the construction of his bunker.
Here they showed him a really good time. They gave him great food, great drink from the railway hotels, and that really helped him during that period of the war when he was doing a lot of cocktail diplomacy with the war cabinet.
The abandoned parts of London's underground serve mainly today for storage or ventilation, like this huge cylinder which housed 2 elevators. And while most passengers would never suspect the second life of London's ghost stations, some may have seen them in movies. The Aldwych station, for example, was used in V for Vendetta and Battle of Britain.
With more than 1 billion slaughtered in 2018, Poland has become the leading European chicken producer and exporter in just 10 years. But the profits at all costs approach is alarming animal rights advocates. This reporter will tell you how.
These chicks may have only just hatched, but their days are already numbered, 42 to be exact. During their 6-week life cycle, their weight will increase at an astonishing rate, from just a few grams to nearly 3 kilos. Poland is Europe's leading poultry exporter. Last year, the country reared, slaughtered, and distributed more than 1 billion chickens. That's 10 times as many as a decade ago.
Our poultry doesn't just go to Europe, it also goes to the African and Asian markets, which makes Poland one of the world's market leaders.
On this farm in the north of Warsaw, 12 poultry houses are each home to 54,000 animals, meaning there are 23 chickens per square meter. Everything is automated, from the temperature of the henhouse to the distribution of food and water. Each year, the farm goes through 6 chicken life cycles. Farmers acknowledge the use of antibiotics, but argue their use is carefully monitored and not systematic.
When there are problems, in the vast majority of cases, they are digestive disorders. There is no risk to the consumer.
On day 42, the chickens leave the factory for the first time and are taken to the slaughterhouse. The facility in Ujazdowek processes 750,000 chickens per day. The animals are killed, plucked, cut up, and finally packaged.
Lows in the highs of the business world now. Alibaba Group's application to sell $15 billion of new shares has been approved by Hong Kong Stock Exchange. The secondary listing would reinstate Hong Kong's as the world's fundraising capital for the 7th time in 11 years. China International Capital Corporation and Credit Suisse have been appointed lead arrangers of Alibaba's Hong Kong offering. The secondary listing will bolster the capitalization of Alibaba, Asia's most valuable company. Alibaba already holds the world record for the largest global initial public offering. For more on this major business story, we are now joined live from Beijing by our correspondent Patrick Falk. Patrick, how has the news of Alibaba's cross listing on the Hang Seng been received by investors in both Hong Kong and mainland China?
Well, this is certainly something that's going to be welcomed by Chinese investors. This is a big vote of confidence for the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Remember, it had been disappointed recently following the failed bid to acquire the London Stock Exchange. Something that sources I spoke to directly told me was about the long-term relevance of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So that was seen as a big miss out. So this is not, as I say, not just, as I say, a big vote of confidence for the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, but also for Hong Kong at a time when it is going through a lot of turmoil. And of course, as we know, the economy has plunged into a recession. The economy shrank by 3.2% in the last quarter. So this is also a big vote of confidence for the long-term stability of the market and its status as a global financial hub.
Okay, Patrick, at a crucial time this is happening, particularly when we talk vis-a-vis the trade war between China and the US still unresolved. Do you think has Alibaba taken a big risk on the timing of this particular IPO?
Well, you might say that, but this has been on the cards. It's been talked about for quite some time. Perhaps not surprising that it's coming after Daniel Zhang took over as CEO of the company. Perhaps this has been a plan that has been in the works since he took over the company. But, you know, this is something that curries favor with Beijing, and also some people would say hedges against any trade war risk. So perhaps the timing isn't that surprising in that sense. And you mentioned also just a moment ago, this would bolster its market capitalization. You know, Alibaba, as we know, it just had another record Singles Day, but we don't know how much events like Singles Day really help to boost the bottom line because of the heavy discounts involved. Analysts say that a lot of subsidies were involved in the event. And, you know, Alibaba is facing stiff competition from other major e-commerce players in China. So it does need to raise capital, as you say, to bolster its market capitalization and make sure that it's strong.
Okay, Patrick, political unrest, as you have just already mentioned, that is ongoing in Hong Kong, and that is also dragging on the Hang Seng Index. Do you think it will have an impact on the success of the Alibaba IPO?
Yeah, well, it certainly is likely to have some sort of impact. You know, the Hang Seng Index, as you say, has struggled over the last few days. That has been a lot to do also with some of the comments that President Donald Trump has made as well over the weekend. He said that there was no agreement on any tariff rollbacks, and also, of course, just in the last 24 hours, he's also said that, you know, if no deal is done, that he may increase tariffs on Chinese imports as well. But certainly the unrest that's been taking place in Hong Kong has contributed to the market uncertainty. However, Alibaba is a major darling of the Chinese market, and it is likely that it will attract a lot of attention regardless of what's happening in Hong Kong at the moment. Long term, it's hard to say how it will fare, but one would imagine that there would be strong demand for Alibaba coming to Hong Kong.
Patrick Falk, thanks. We're looking to our Beijing correspondent, Patrick Falk. Now, moving on, the Japanese automaker Nissan has reported a 70% drop in its quarterly profits. The company has also cut its full-year forecast to an 11-year low. Nissan sales have been falling after the ouster of former head Carlos Ghosn. Ghosn is awaiting trial in Japan on charges of financial misconduct, which he denies. The company's new executive team is due to take over on 1st of December. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned with Indus News. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.